سبحان الله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين. نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، ونشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه أفضل الصلاة والتسليم، وعلى آله الميامين، وعلى أصحابه المختارين، وعلى من اتبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. سبحان الله نؤمن به ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستنصره ونستجيره فإنه حق من هدى الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له. اللهم يا علي عظيم نبتهل إليك وندعوك، اللهم اصلح لنا ديننا الذي هو عصمة أمرنا، واصلح لنا دنيانا التي فيها معاشنا، واصلح لنا آخرتنا التي فيها معادنا، واجعل الحياة زيادة لنا في كل خير، واجعل الموت راحة لنا من كل شر. Of the many narratives and discourses of the Quran that one comes back to repeatedly, and one revisits, pondering, reflecting, analyzing in light of what we experience as human beings in life, is of course one such parts in the Quran is the parable of light in Surah An-Nur, the chapter of light, or the chapter titled Light in the Quran. And in Surah An-Nur, if you will recall, Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. Allah is the light of the heavens and earth. مثل نوره كمشكاة فيها مصباح، المصباح في زجاجة، الزجاجة كأنها كوكب دري يوقد من شجرة مباركة زيتونة لا شرقية ولا غربية يكاد زيتها يضيء ولو لم تمسسه نار، نور على نور يهدي الله لنوره من يشاء ويضرب الله الأمثال للناس والله بكل شيء عليم. This parable, God is the light of the heavens and earth. The parable of God's light is that of a niche containing a lamp. The niche is an indentation in the wall, a feature of all homes, Mediterranean homes in particular, before the invention of electricity, is the existence of a niche where you safely place a lamp. And of course, this was the only way that you can have stable and constant positions for light in pre-modern homes. And the parable of God is that of a niche containing a lamp. The lamp and by lamp here is the actual part that lights fire, the actual part which catches fire in order to generate light. And so the lamp is in a glass, and the glass shines like a radiant star, ككوكب دري. And this lamp is lit by oil as if from an olive tree. And the oil of this olive tree neither comes from the east nor the west, but the oil of the olive tree is so pure that it in itself shines as if the oil, is light, even without fire. And Allah describes this as light upon light. The light of the lamp within a radiant glass, so radiant that it shines, fed by oil that is so pure, and the oil itself is so radiant that it shines even without having been lit. Now, of course, this parable has inspired numerous discourses and narratives, especially in Islamic mysticism. And so much that has been written on it either from a mystical Sufi perspective or even from philosophical perspectives. And so much of the discourses analyze the nature of this parable, the niche, the lamp, the radiant glass, and the radiant oil that either is from the east nor west. And it is very hard to summarize, even come close to summarizing what has been written on it. So many have suggested that the niche is a metaphor for the human heart, that the human heart is where the divine light resides. And many of these scholars theorized that the human heart, which can contain the lamp, and said that the lamp is like God's revelation, God's guidance. If this revelation, if God's speech, God's revelation is placed within the correct niche, the correct human heart, it radiates like a luminous star. The combination of revelation in the right heart radiates. And that the radiant glance, many have theorized, is like the instrumentality of reason, that when revelation comes to the right heart, and this revelation and heart shines through human reason, and it is capable of making human reason like a radiant star, shining goodness, shining guidance unto existence. And that the olive tree, the oil from the olive tree that is neither east nor west, well, olive trees, if they grow in the right place in the Mediterranean, which is quite literally neither due west nor due east, but precisely in the right place, they produce the best possible olive oil known to humankind. And that when Allah describes this oil as if it radiates without fire, that this symbolizes, the entire olive tree symbolizes the root of Abrahamic revelation, that the niche, the human heart, the lamp, which most take as, or many scholars have said is like the Quran, and the radiant glass, human reason, fed by this olive tree, and the olive tree symbolizes the continuing natural truth, the continuing rooted truth throughout human history, the truth of God's message that is never wavering, is never different. It is the same message that human truth is rooted in, and that in turn God's light is rooted in. And that's the tree of the Abrahamic truth, the truth of God's revelation from the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam onwards, to the Prophet Muhammad, of course, and the Quran. And as I said, we can spend hours talking about the various debates and constructions. If you are even interested in coming close to being exposed to the nuance and complexity and richness of Islamic discussions on the metaphor of the light in Surah An-Nur, you can look at Tafsir al-Shirazi and the density of his discussion just on this metaphor, which he dedicates a considerable amount of time to. And in fact, this metaphor becomes quite critical for the entire illuminist philosophical school in Islamic theology. But we can all agree on, if we want to simplify the metaphor and get to the truth of things, is that the niche is a place. It's a physical place. a physical place that is capable of holding light. In other words, being a convenient, appropriate, rightful place where light can be placed and can shine from. In the same way that if the niche exists, if this indentation in the wall exists, but there's no light placed there, then it loses its meaning. And in fact, it could become a repository of all types of things. As a niche, it is created to accommodate, to be a rightful place for shining light. But if you don't place light in there, that niche can collect dust, can become a place where cobwebs grow. It can be a place where you stack up a bunch of papers. It can be a place where you put some figurine in. But its essential function, and that is to be a place where light is placed so that it can light whatever physical structure it exists in, is missed if a lamp is not placed in that niche. So whether the niche is the human heart, or the niche is the human body, or the niche is in fact the physical world, as some have suggested, in all cases we know that it is by design, it was created so that it can hold, so that it can play an appropriate, proper function, and that is to shine light. But it can be as easily denied that role if no lamp is placed in this niche. The niche can be our physical world. The niche can be our physical bodies. The niche can be the human heart. Whatever it is a place that can accommodate the divine light. Now, mind you, part of the metaphor of light upon light is that while we see and understand God through God's handiwork, through God's attribute, we don't know and cannot know the truth of what is God. In the same way that light performs a function, it interacts with our eyes, and we are familiar. Light is familiar to us. We are aware of light because we experience light. But what is the true nature of light? What is the truth of light? It is beyond comprehension. We can track or note or experience as a phenomena what happens when there is no light. But what is the truth of light? Like other things in our existence, that we experience, but we cannot define, like fire, like gravity. We can only describe, but we cannot define. The light is not dependent on the niche. In fact, the light has the ability to exist entirely independently of the niche. It is just that when the light is placed in its proper place, i.e., when the light comes to the niche performs its righteous function. When the light comes to the niche, the room lights up. We all experience the impact of that light. The light is also separate and apart from the radiant glass. The glass could be transparent, could be clear, but it also could be foggy, could be obstructionist, could be full of blemishes, could be full of scratches. We experience the light through the glass, but the light and the glass are separate. In the same way that we experience the truth of God through the radiance and illuminations of reason, but we know that if this light impacts the intellect in the appropriate and correct way, the intellect can shine goodness and well-being onto existence. But if the intellect does not know how to benefit from the light, if the intellect resists the light, if the glass is foggy, if the glass is obscure, then in fact, the very purpose of the niche fails. Although the niche was built to accommodate the lamp, but the quality of the glass or the lack of quality in the glass can either make the entire thing work fantastically well or be an abysmal failure. The oil, which I tend to think is in fact a metaphor for the nature of God's speech to human beings. We understand that the Quran describes this oil as the purest of kinds, that it is so pure that it is as if it radiates without even fire. But the oil, regardless of how pure it is, if you take the oil and you place it in the niche, regardless of how radiant the oil is, and there is no fire, the entire enterprise fails. Yes, you will have shiny, bright, luminous oil in the niche, but you won't have light. The room will not be lit up. In order for the room to light up, you need the niche, you need the lamp, you need the correct glass, the luminous glass, and you need this most fantastical oil. This oil that can make the light of God shine as if light upon light. In my view, the niche is like creation itself. Whether the human body, whether the human heart, it is ready-made to receive God's light. If you put revelation, i.e. the luminous oil, in the niche, but without the instrumentalities of the transparent glass, reason, and the truth of divine illumination, the fire itself, you won't get a lit room. It won't work. If you have the light of God, but the glass, or you don't have the radiant glass, or you have a flawed glass, or you have a fogged up glass, again, the truth of God is there, but the room is not lit up. You pause for a second. We can all look at the niche and say, wow, this place, this house has a niche. And the niche, it was structurally created for light. But in our modern condition, we human beings look at the niche and we say, what is this for? We know that by nature, the nature of things point to God. The very existence of things, it is like the niche. It was created to accommodate the light of God. You look at birds in the sky, you look at the meticulous rise of the sun, the intricate movement between night and day, the sunrise and sundown, the movement of the seas, the movement of the rivers, the movement of trees, the movement of creation, and it is all like the niche, saying, we have been created to reflect the light of God. This is what we were structurally created for. But the human condition in modernity is we look at the niche and we say, how interesting that the house we find ourselves born in, we literally dropped in this house. We had no hand in creating ourselves in this house. But we look at the niche and say, how interesting that this house has niches. It might just be, it must be just a coincidence. The very existence of the niche, it's the house calling upon the light of God, saying, I was created with this as proof of accommodation, as proof that this is where God's light belongs. But we look at the niche and we say, no, we don't know what to place there. We're not sure that a lamp, the divine lamp, should go there. We'll use the niche for other things. Maybe we'll use it for extra storage. Maybe we'll put a stack of papers. Maybe we'll do whatever we do with the niche. But by not using the niche for what it was in fact created for, we choose to live in darkness. And in darkness, we feel the loss and the lack of purpose. And we look around and say, wow, why don't I understand anything? Why is it that I can't see anything? Why is it that I don't understand why I'm here for? I don't understand what tomorrow is about. I don't understand what growing old is about. I don't understand what death is about. I don't understand why people I love die. I don't understand why people that I don't know are born and they become attached to. I don't understand anything about anything. But in order to understand, you have to clean up the niche and put the lamp there with the right oil and allow God's light to shine. But no, that's a modern fallacy. Yes, in the darkness, I see injustice, I see unfairness, I see abuse, I see loss, I see abuse of substances, I see suicide, I see mental illness, I see spiritual illness, I see psychological illness, I see everything that is wrong, but I don't want the light in the niche. But then the second step are those people who in fact use the niche for its proper purpose and light the light in the niche. They have the right oil, they have the right lamp, but once the light of God is allowed to exist, the glass surrounding the niche is not like God describes it, a radiant planet. No, the glass surrounding the niche is dull, could even be blackened out with sin, could even be dull and foggy with ignorance. The glass that surrounds the niche doesn't live up to the luminosity of the oil and the flame, the glass, the intellect. The intellect. Yes, you've put the light in the proper place, in the niche. But the intellect that is ready to receive that flame and to reflect the light in fact, distorts it. Why distorts it? Because light is demanding. You see, the thing about light is that, yes, it can allow us to see our ways through things. It can help us to avoid bumping into things. It can help us tell the difference between a chair and a table. It can help us tell the difference between a sofa and a bed. But about the light is that it also allows us to see whether we exist in beauty or exist in ugliness. The thing about light is that it has this truthful quality. It confronts us with the truth of what is. And if you put the light in the niche, and you have the right glass, and the light shines, and you discover that what you exist in is ugliness, the temptation is enormous. Even if you don't have the guts to turn off the light altogether, the temptation is extremely powerful to fog up the glass that surrounds the light. You see, there are countries and people from Saudi to Egypt that can't afford the light or can't afford the truth of the light. And so they try to turn off the light altogether. But what is far more common, as we see in places like Iran or many other societies, is that you fog up the glass so you don't see your own ugliness. And you don't see the truth of the divine, what the truth of the divine reveals to yourself about yourself. The pure, unadulterated, luminous oil, the oil that is neither east nor west, does it really take a genius to figure out that Allah is telling you that the oil of revelation, in my view, the Quran, which needs to combine with the flame of God to feed into a translucent intellect, placed in the proper niche that can truly shine truth. But once that truth shines, you better be ready to receive it. Because the worst thing is when the truth shines and you don't like what you see, is that you obfuscate it and you try to bury it. But does it really take a genius to realize that this oil is described as neither east nor west to tell you that don't you dare give a physical identity to that truth of revelation. Don't you dare make the revelation about east or west. Don't you dare make the revelation about a culture, a nationality, a race, a tribe. The truth of the oil, the luminous oil of revelation, is like natural law itself. It is not anchored in any sociological reality, but transcends all. The metaphor of light upon light. What is most painful is that we, human beings, generally, but Muslims specifically, we've allowed the lights in our niches to go out. And even when we've allowed the light in the niche to exist, we've made sure to obfuscate and to corrupt and to otherwise sully the glass and distort the glass through which the divine light shines. And even the oil, we've largely, quite often, when it comes to the divine light, we've attempted to cheat the oil, to replace it with the oil of nationalism, the oil of ethnic identity, the oil of some form of tribalism. This is the condition that we are in. May we wake up. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم أستغفر الله يستجب لكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين وسبحان الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه يا رب العالمين. Among the stories that caught my attention is an article that appeared in Muslim Matters. As far as I understand, the article was authored by a group of people that used to belong to the Sufi order of Sheikh Nuh Hamim Nuh Keller. And basically the article calls upon Muslims to end the culture of complacency. The authors of the article used to belong to the Sufi order and left the order because of allegations of abuse, especially abuse of children in school. And other abuses that the article complains about that occurs against married couple and the like. And generally, the article complains of a culture of despotism, authoritarianism, a culture in which strict obedience is mandated by the sheikh and apparently his wife and his representatives. And when abuses occurred, there were investigations, but then cover-ups, etc., etc. And this led to a large number of people leaving the Sufi order. And the article is by the former members of the Sufi order that says the culture of complacency must end. That Muslims have a culture of covering up for tyrants and despots and abusers, and that this must end. And Hameen Keller is a convert to Islam who belonged to the Shazali Sufi order. The Shazaliya, of course, is a very large Sufi order and has many, many chapters, different parts of the world. But he belonged, or he joined the Shazali Sufi order, and he created a branch of the order in Jordan, where he created a community where he is the head of that community and the sheikh of that community. I am critical of all those who exoticize Islam, who think that in order to be Muslim, you have to turn back time and exist as if in the medieval world, and that Islam is embodied in a set of symbolisms that are exotic in nature because they all come from a land far away. And that part of what Islam is about is the whole Western mythology of Oriental despotism, and that in order to be a real Muslim, while you drive a car and use the net, but you try to recreate the mores and norms of the medieval world in every other regard. But you pause at something like the reported culture of abuse, whether with this sheikh or other sheikhs, especially in light of the metaphor of light upon light. So many people that converted to Islam gave up their entire life, uprooted their families, moved to Jordan, joined the sheikh, and joined this community. Were following a dream. And the dream can be summed up in light upon light. The dream is often that you imagine the sheikh to be the embodiment of God's light, and the light of the sheikh upon the divine light appears to be light upon light. And the attraction and the call of light upon light is like an intoxicant. It makes you think, well, finally, I can exist in a world that makes sense. I exist in a world where there is beauty, because it is God's truth. And if there is God's truth, there must be beauty. And in God's truth and in God's beauty, there is no fear and no anxiety, no worry and no consternation. There is no jealousy, no animosity, no hostility, no competition. But why do experiments like this fail? Remember that the light must shine through the luminous glass. The luminous glass is the glass of correct thinking, correct reason, correct rationality. The luminous glass can in fact play a critical role in lighting up the room when its purity matches the purity of the flame. But when God's light is conditioned, when you say that God's light is conditional on transmitting and accepting and blindly following illegal text from the Middle Ages, when illegal text written by a medieval scholar becomes the embodiment of Sharia, the definer of the glass, and you are told there is no role for your reason when you are confronted with the transmitted reports attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, and there is no role for reason when you are confronted with the will of the Sheikh. I wonder how radiant that light can be, that that glass can be. The thing that so many Muslims in the modern age consistently fail to remember, that the light of God appealed to people who were reasonable, who were asked to perpetuate reasonableness, and that reasonableness meant active intellects, constantly engaged analytical intellects. That Islam was never about the exotic. Islam was never about the marginal. Islam was never about the exceptional. Islam was never a vacation from or an abstention from the affairs of humanity. Islam was never a suspension of the intellectual processes of knowledge and analyzing, collecting and analyzing and sifting through data. Islam was never about being an exception to life. Islam built a civilization because it allowed the light of God to join with the light of reason, and through the combination of both to shine onto humanity. Islam was never about a cult. It was never a cult. Every time that Islam is spoken about in terms of the exotic movements and exotic cultures, and in terms that are not accessible to human reason within the historical moment of the niche, where the niche exists at its proper historical time, I realize that the light of God is going to be obstructed and snuffed out by the glass that contains the light of God. If the glass is not radiant, and for the glass to be radiant, it must be at the cutting edge of intellectual probity. You cannot have a radiant glass that is dull, stupid, idiotic, ignorant, lazy, unengaged. If that intellect can only reflect the truth of the 10th century or the 11th century, simply because Sheikh such and such wrote the text, and so this becomes your radiant glass, then in fact it is darkened glass, and it will kill the luminous oil, and it will kill the luminous divine flame, and the niche will not serve any purpose at all, because the darkness will persist. How often does God speak to us in the most reasonable fashion? And how often do we insist on listening to the reasonable and rendering it unreasonable because of our own shortcomings and inability or unwillingness to rise up to what the divine message demands of us. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم أسأل الله يستجب لكم اللهم اعف عنا اللهم ارحمنا اللهم تب علينا يا تواب. Allah forgive our sins, grant us, guide us to the right path, the straight path. Enable us, Ya Rabb, to be like radiant glass that reflects your truth, that shines light and luminosity upon humanity. Ya Ali, Ya Azim, waqum as-salam.